skulls. So where does my background come from? So I am trained as a conservation technician. I have worked with Manitoba Conservation before as an enforcement officer for a short period of time, and then I transferred over into interpretation, which is basically environmental education. And so that's what I still do to this day. So I work as a park interpreter. And before I even did any of that, I was involved with the Manitoba Envirothon, and I run basically, I run the wildlife discipline. So that's one of the main topics for the event. So I create questions and content with a crew of people on the wildlife subject. So that's kind of where my training comes in and background there. So I kind of want to know really quickly, so if you guys can either type it in to the chat box if you can, I would really like to know from you guys, what are you hoping to learn today? Like, so what are your goals and what do you want to get out of this lesson today? So if you can type in the chat there and just let me know what your goals are, so then I can kind of get an idea of what you guys are expecting as well. I mean, you're going to get what I'm going to give you, but I can tweak it for you guys too.
So Jen, yeah, I'm not seeing anything in the chat, but oh, it's coming in. I think we just need to give people a little bit of time to find the keyboard and that type of thing. Okay, perfect. So we're seeing, Wendy is wondering like what to look for when hiking at Fort White that would help figure out what kind of animals have passed by. Jackie's wondering what kind of story Scat tells, like what animal was there, how long ago it was there, what they ate. And then Chris is wondering how to tell specifically the difference between fox and coyote, both their tracks and their scat that they leave behind. Yeah, I'm looking for a little bit of a kind of a way to judge scale a little bit, because when you see things that animals leave behind, sometimes if you see a set of tracks all by itself, you can't figure out how big they are in comparison to something else. So
well,
really
I've got the
something real.
Yeah. I've got the perfect thing for you guys. All right. So I'm going to share with you guys a PowerPoint that I made up for the Envirothon. So I wanted to also let you guys know, so Katrina, if you wanted to even attach this link and share it later, is that on the Manitoba Envirothon page, I've created a series of resources for the students to study, and there's the same things that you guys can study. So it has in there like track identification, it has scat identification, and it has fur identification. So I have all three of those in like a PowerPoint and a video form. So if ever in future that you did want to reference, that's also a great resource for you to check out. Or Katrina, I can even send you the link later to the specific ones as well. So so first things first, I'm going to share with you guys my favorite thing to talk about, which is scat. So maybe Katrina, just let me know when it pops up on your screen.
It is there, yeah.
All right, perfect. All righty, so we're gonna just go over scat. So the first of the reasons, like why do we even want to know about scat? Well, it lets us know everything about what animal is there, where it's been, what it's eaten, what its diet is. It can let us know about the range of that wildlife animal and how much space it needs, as well as how animals overlap in that space. And for us, I mean, for us, it's just fun to know what is the exact animal, what was here, what was making, doing all these different things in this area. So I'm going to scooch down here and we're going to talk about identifying scat. So when you're looking at scat, you want to keep a few things in mind. You want to keep out like where the scat is, like where you found it. And this is like even as grand as like where in Manitoba did you find it? Because you got to keep in mind when you're doing any sort of tracking and looking at scat or tracks, you need to kind of bring in all the information. Like you got to realize, okay, this looks like say a bobcat scat, but do you guys even have bobcats in this area? If you don't have bobcats in the area, it's probably not a bobcat scat, right? So you got to kind of think of everything in a whole. So where the location is, the size of it, the shape, what's found within, those are like right within the scat. But you also got to keep in mind other things when you're tracking, things like, what species are found in this area? Are there any, tracks and other scats in this area that I can compare to? What's the range of the species, etc. So have there been any animal sightings in this area? Like if we've, heard that there's been coyotes that have gone through Fort White recently, okay, then we know maybe it's potentially a coyote, but you know, we also allow people to walk their dogs on this trail, so it could be a dog, right? So you got to kind of, you know, really be able to think and kind of bring in all the factors when you're identifying any sort of track or scat. So that was my little side note there. So things that you want to look for specifically scat, obviously here we go, the size, the shape, and what's found within. And I'm going to get into detail on these. Oh yes, my one thing that I always like to put in here, because again, this is for students, is that when you guys look at scat, make sure you're not touching it with your bare hands, because there are parasites and pathogens that can be within animal scat. So you always want to be very careful. You know, poke it with a stick, that's totally fine. Just don't breathe it in, and don't, you know, touch it with your bare hands or touch your mouth or anything like that. So there is a huge scat identification key that you can find. I'm not going to go through this because I'm going to teach you guys how I like to do it. But if you would like a key, there are keys that you can find online and you can print out, and you can have, you know, like a simple step-by-step guide. I'm basically going to be showing you guys how to do it my way. Pardon me. So for diet and scat morphology, so this is what, depending on the shape of your scat, like what it looks like, will depend on what the diet is of the animal. So if you find scat that's like shapeless and loose and it's crumbly and it's got like blunt ends, usually that means that it's a fruit diet, right? So it's got like berries. So you'll notice it's kind of crumbly, like you'll see there in that picture in the middle, that's actually coyote scat. So coyotes are omnivores, they'll eat fruits and they'll also eat meat. So they'll eat both, right? So that's a diet of a fruit because it's very crumbly. If you find that it's very tubular and it's smooth and it's got like this big kind of like tube casing, that's basically meat and organs. So that's what that lets you know about the content of that species, of what's within that scat. And then if you see it's twisted, tapered ropes, and it's got lots of hair and bone in it, so then you know that's like a lot of, they've eaten more of the hair and bone when you see it appear in the scat. So if you don't see hair and bone, it's probably just a lot of meat and organs that they just ate. But if you see hair and bone, then that means that that's what they've, you know, they've chewed the hide of the animal and chewed up the bones as well. Now scat, this is how I differentiate it. Pellets are one way of identifying scat. So I'm going to pop over to my other camera and I'm just going to show you the variety of pellets that I have here. So everything that you see on the screen right here, those are the different pellets that we have of the species here in Manitoba. And the animals that produce pellets are always going to be herbivores, okay? So these are animals that have the high in fiber diet, which produces that pellet-like scat. So immediately when you see pellets that are on the ground, you can automatically know that this belongs to a species that is a herbivore, okay? These are a wide range of herbivores, but these are all herbivores. So on the left, you can see here I've got ungulates, rabbits. So ungulates are things like deer, elk, moose, caribou. Those are all listed as ungulates. Rabbits, squirrels, chipmunks, porcupines, and beavers. These are all animals that make pellets. And we'll go through them a little bit in detail. So white-tailed deer, you can switch back to the PowerPoint if you want to feature that one too now. So we have white-tailed deer scat can really change depending on if it has a high moisture content or not in it. So when they don't have a high moisture content, they're just going to be kind of like what you see on the top left, a regular looking scat. Now, how I compare every single scat and how I remember the sizes is I compare it to food. So I hope you guys have ate and you're not hungry, because I'm about to compare every single piece of poop here to food of some sort. But it helps me to remember, and then I can keep in my head what that size is when I'm out in the field. Because like, I'm not going to remember, you know, this one is 1 inch by 1/2 an inch, or this one is, you know, 5 centimeters. Like I'm never going to remember that. So for me, I compare it to food, and you'd be surprised how much food compares to animal scat. So white-tailed deer is basically the size of chocolate-covered raisins. So when you see chocolate-covered raisins, you'll know, there you go. Don't eat them. They're scat. And you'll notice when they have a high moisture content, they actually look like black. So like white-tailed deer, it's like a black tarry ball, kind of on the bottom left. This one's dried out a bit, but it would be like a shiny black when that's fresh. And so sometimes you can find scat from deer clumped together, and that just means it has a high moisture content. Elk, that's the next size up. I doubt you'll see elk anywhere near Fort White, but you can compare it to chocolate covered almonds. So that's the size of our elk scat. When we get to our moose are much larger than an elk, and it depends on their diet, again, what their scat looks like. When they have a lot of like herbaceous plants that are like woody, then they're gonna have solid wood plops. So these I like to compare to like chocolate covered walnuts, like they're bigger than an almond. And these guys here will form these solid pellet sizes that look very similar to elk. So you got to keep that kind of size comparison in mind. Also think, what is the environment? Do we have moose in this area? If not, do we have elk in this area? And so that can help you differentiate the two. But their diet in the summertime, when they are feasting on aquatic vegetation, they have the most ridiculous scat, because it comes out like, you see the bottom, the one that's like a semi-formed pellet, but it's like a blob. And then they also have, it looks like, honestly, like a big pile of moose diarrhea. It's just this large pool of poop, to be honest. And that just means that it's not that the moose is sick, it's just that their diet at that time is a high in aquatic vegetation. So you can see that around wetland areas if you have moose in the area. Beaver, so another pellet is our beaver pellets. Now beaver pellets look just like compressed sawdust, and this is because beavers chew the inner cambium, right, on the inner bark of trees, and their diet is that woody vegetation. So it literally comes out looking like a clump of sawdust in a big pellet form. And you're gonna find these, this is a key here, you're gonna find it in water or near water, right? So they generally have like a latrine in their near their lodge or in their lodge. So then you're going to find it around. I once had a kid while we were critter dipping pull one out with a net and come up to me and go, "What is this?" And I was like, "You're holding beaver poo." And then that was a fun adventure of a day for him. I doubt he'll ever forget that. Our chipmunks, they have scat, very small, similar to long grain rice. So that's one way to remember chipmunks. And again, where are you finding it? Is it like on a picnic table? Is it, you know, on branches? Like you can find it, depends where you find it, can really help you identify what species. You know, is it underneath your house? Like maybe you have a rat, maybe you have, you know, or a mouse, and it's not a chipmunk. If it's outside, you'll know long grain rice, you probably have a chipmunk in that area. Squirrels. Some people get squirrels mixed up with deer, oddly enough, but they're not. Squirrels have like Tic Tac size poops, so they're quite large, and a lot of people are not aware how large squirrel poop can be. So yeah, they have poops like Tic Tacs. So if you have long grain rice on your picnic table, that's a chipmunk. If you have a Tic Tac on your table, then you know you have a squirrel. Our cottontail rabbits, so this is very common, you'll have a lot of these in the area, you probably have them in the backyard. These are like chocolate M&Ms. Now, the chocolate M&Ms, when they come out the first time, they can be very wet looking and they're like really dark. That is the first suggestion of the scat. And then the rabbit will actually re-eat that, will eat it again. And then they'll take out the rest of the nutrients, because the first time they ate it, they didn't pull the nutrients out of it. So they'll eat it twice. And the second time it comes out, it looks really fibrous and dry. So it could be fibrous and dry because it's the second time through. It could also be very fibrous and dry because it's been sitting out there for a very long time. But if you see really black wet ones, those are the first scat that comes out. It has a name which I can't recall right now.
That's wonderful, Jen, because one of our volunteers actually asked that question in the chat. How do you tell the difference between a rabbit poop that's gone through once and gone through twice?
Oh, well, there you go. Yes. So, one of my favorite scats is porcupine scat. So porcupine scat looks like macaroni. So like obviously it doesn't have the holes in it, but it looks like that kind of shape of the macaroni. And you quite often will find it in the form of a macaroni necklace. So you'll see the scat it kind of comes out in like a thread of macaroni poop in a way, but not always. So lots of times what you will see, they find them in large piles at the bases of trees. And this is because porcupines will regularly climb a tree, hang out in that tree for 3 to 5 days, and then move on to the next tree. So I think it has to do with, the way that they are moving about, and you tend to find them at the base of the tree. So just keep in mind, if you see brown macaroni noodles, you've got a porcupine. All right, so those are all of the pellets. So I'm gonna pop back to my other camera, and I'm gonna try and see if you guys can help identify which ones we have here. And I think I even have an extra one here too that I didn't talk about in my video. This guy right here. I don't know if I can see it up close for you guys. So this right here is actually a scat that kind of looks like, is it Weetabix? Like the long wheat, little pieces of wheat. This is muskrat scat. So I'm trying to see if you guys can get it in the light. But it's basically like long, kind of noodly scats. And they, here's remind me of, I'm trying to remember, there was a cereal that I was forced to eat as like a bran cereal as a child. And it was kind of reminds me of muskrat scat. All right, so let's go through this. Let's see what you guys can figure out here. Do I need to maybe bring my camera closer? Let's see. Is that better? All right. I want you guys to take a look.
Pretty good.
And identify the species here. So if you can, type in the chat box. I just want to see if you guys can think about it. If I were to look at this in the field, it would look like it was comprised of sawdust. So what would that tell you?
I'm seeing in the chat, beaver.
Correct. Well done. You have done it. You have beaver scat. All right. Let's go this one here. It is the size. Well, you know what? Here's my hand. Let's see if you guys can determine the size based on my hand and the different food items that I've given you. Any ideas? It's not a deer.
Oh, we've got squirrel in the chat. That would have been my guess.
This is a squirrel. Yes.
All right, great job.
Now, I am going to say one. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm so surprised how large the squirrel poops are.
Squirrel poops can be huge. Now, this brings me to a very, very good disclaimer here, is that some species, depending on the size of the animal, your scats are going to be different. So if you have a very small deer, like a fawn, you're going to have a different scat size, right, than an adult deer. So you really, again, have to tie in, what are the tracks nearby, where is it found, and really kind of bring in all of the information to determine what species it is. Because, for example, check out these two scats. This one on the left here, can you guys, I wonder if I need to bring my lamp up a little closer. This will help. Is that helping or making it worse? I feel like it's making it worse. Okay.
No, I think that's actually helping.
Did it? Where it was up top?
No, it was better where after
help up top, or is it?
That's good.
Okay. Okay, so sorry. So we have the two different scats here, but do you notice how similar these are? Yeah, these are very similar scats, but this one here is a squirrel mold from a squirrel, and this one here is from a white-tailed deer. So you notice how similar in size these specific ones, but my guess is that this is from a very, very small white-tailed deer. So this is where I just want to make sure you keep in mind location and that you can have some variation in size for like a larger animal. You know, squirrels are, you're probably going to have roughly, you know, smaller size squirrels, but keep that in mind. So here is our deer. I kind of gave that one away in my discussion, but our white-tailed deer. So let's see. What do you guys think this one is?
Oh, there, pop it in the chat. Okay, Chris is saying elk.
Correct. Yes.
Oh,
absolutely. Nice. You got it right. An elk. Good call. Let me go a little bit closer to the distance here. Okay. And how about?
And we have moose in from Catherine and Jane and Virginia and Adrian.
Perfect. You got it. What about this one?
Round. Okay, we're thinking rabbit.
Yes, you are right, you guys. Good job. And last one.
Oh, those are little. Okay, Catherine is wondering about chipmunk.
Correct. Correct.
So would those be kind of similar to some mice and voles and things like that too?
Yeah, they'll be smaller though.
Okay.
They will be smaller than even these ones. Yeah. So there you go. So we have covered all the pellet scat. Does anyone have questions about pellet scat before I move on to the next one?
I love that that's a question that you're asking everyone.
Here is also, I wonder if you guys can see this because I'm not taking it out of the bag. This is actual scat from moose that I've picked up out in the field. I don't know if you can see it there.
You zoom out just a little bit. You can see the forms of it and you can see the color really well. There we go. So that moose was not eating a lot of aquatic vegetation at the time.
No, no. Funny story though, when I was in college, I was doing a field assessment and doing a study on determining population of a species, and I was doing this field work and I was tromping through a wetland and I stepped in like this mud hole and my boot got sucked in and then I ended up falling sideways and I landed in this like wet kind of marshy area. And I look around me and I was sitting completely in a moose scat, like a pool of moose poo I was literally sitting in. And that was my most memorable moment from college. It was a great day. All right. So no questions there? No, we're all good?
We're all good to move on to the next segment, I think.
Okay, perfect. Now the next one we're going to talk about is tubular scat. So tubular scat is going to be belonging to species like canines, felines, and raccoons. So if you're noticing tubular scat, you're going to be putting it in one of those three groups. Now, canines, for those of you that aren't aware, would be things like coyotes, foxes, wolves, canids would be things like bears. Felines, those would be like our bobcats and our cougars, also known as mountain lions, okay? So when we look at this and we see a tubular scat, we can know that it's from one of the carnivores, one of the ones that eat meat, right? So remember from earlier, tubular scat means that they eat meat. So we're gonna go through. Now, I'm gonna start with the one that is the most interesting one. So we're gonna learn about red fox today, a few like about different things, track, scat, etc. Now, foxes behave very similarly to cats, I find, in how they hunt and just their behavior in general. I find their tracks belong to like the canine family. So you see the tracks really do have that canine look to them, but their scat is very similar to the weasel family. So although they are within the canine family, they have very interesting scat. And that's because red foxes, they're going to have very small scat, okay? So keep this in mind. If you notice that one, it's like less than 2 inches. So it's a very small scat. They also are going to be tubular, but you'll notice they're twisted. So do you notice how in both of these, on the omnivore diet and the one below it is the rodent diet, that they kind of have like twisted, it's like a little bit of a twisted scat, and they've got long taper ends. So that's very similar to the weasel family, but it's in the canine family. So I always just want to keep that in mind. They also will have like a musky scent to them. And again, depending on the diet, remember that scat's going to change shape. So if they've got a little bit of a herby vegetation as well as meat diet, then they get that omnivore diet and it's kind of that more formed scat. If they have more of a rodent diet, it's more loose for them. So just depends on what they're eating. Now coyotes, they have an omnivore diet. So they also can have, you know, different things in there like meat, bones, hair, berries, insects. You can find all those things within a coyote scat, but they are going to be tubular. I generally think of coyote scat to be like the size of like, what are those jumbo wieners? Like not a smoky, but like a wiener. You know, like, you know, like you get like the big Oscar Mayer wiener ones that are like big. So I like to think of it's like roughly that size and bigger. So right, depending again on the size of that coyote. But what you're going to look at again, remember, where is it? You know, where am I finding this scat? What area is it? What's within it? So often you will see bones and hair. 99% of the time, I'm always seeing hair and bones within my coyote scat. And they often will deposit the scat on trails and trail crossings. So you'll see kind of like wolves do that too, where you'll find like kind of like at the crossing or on trails, like right on the smack dab on the middle of a trail, you'll be like, well, this guy took a poop right here. And sometimes they do have multiple scat deposits. So that means like they poop multiples in the same area. Now wolf scats can be massive. Like picture like the biggest, longest smoky you can imagine. And they have these really big, thick scats. They're tubular. They're going to be kind of a little bit tapered on the ends. And again, same content as a coyote. So a coyote and a wolf look very similar, just one's going to be larger than the other. And then we have our bears. So our bear scat, now this one is highly variable. It does really change depending on what they eat. So as you can see, when they eat a very high fruit diet, then they can have like, you know, it looks just like a pile of berries on the ground sometimes, honestly. It doesn't even look like a poop. You're just, oh, there's a pile of berries on the ground, or, and you know, that, but it's gonna be a big pile of berries on the ground. So bear scat obviously is always going to be very large. And I've noticed a lot of the times with bear scat, they kind of go in like plops. So it'll be like they have like a plop over here, and then they walk a bit and there's a little bit of a plop, and there's a little plop. So I don't know if it's like hanger-ons or what with our bears, but they tend to not necessarily just have like one big pile. It's kind of like a pile and then a little pile, maybe a little bit down. Or maybe it is just one big pile, but don't be, you know, that is common to see both of those. And again, just think huge poop. Okay, I'm gonna stop there, and I might actually scooch to see if I can have my raccoon. There it is, raccoon. Now raccoon is the other one that is very interesting, and I want to talk about raccoon right now too, because they are tubular, but they kind of have like, you know what it is? I like to think that raccoon is very similar to bear scat, but on a smaller scale. But people sometimes think raccoon scat, like look how tiny this is. This is like less than 3 inches. I have seen raccoon scat that is as large as a small bear. Like some raccoons have poops that are just absolutely massive. And that's because raccoons can be absolutely huge as well. And they're similar to the bear scat in that, you know, they can have, you know, all berries. They can have, you know, all insect shells in them. That one's really, really fun to find, especially like when the June bugs are out. A lot of the scat that I'll find along the trails are all the shells of June bugs. So raccoon and bear, very, very similar, but different sizes. And you are going to find, you're going to want to tie in what other, you know, tracks are in the area, right? So that's very, very important. So I'm going to quiz you guys right now. Go back to my other table here, and we'll do a quiz on some tubular poops. Where is my, okay.
Just jump in here for a second for folks. I'm able to change the size of what I'm seeing on the screen. In the middle of your screen, there should be two little white vertical lines that you can grab with your mouse and pull it over to the side. So if you want to increase the size of the area that you're looking at the spotlighted poop models in, you can do that.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So there we go. I'm gonna just put that down there for reference so I know where we are. Okay. Let's start with this guy here. Now, I'm gonna also give you guys a disclaimer on these molds that I have here. These molds are all very small molds because let's just focus on the shape. Don't be too concerned on exactly how large they are, because I find these molds to be very small compared to what I find out in nature. So let's see here, guys. What do you think? Let's take a look at this one. I just tighten my camera. I'll give you some hints here. So this you would generally find out on a trail where it would be crossing with another trail. It's common. It's probably the size of a large Oscar Mayer wiener, and you would find things like bones and hair could be found in it.
Okay, so coyotes coming in here. We had a suspicion about raccoon, but I think now that you've given some of that hints, we're also seeing some wolf questions.
Okay, so the key here is the size. So if I said it looks kind of like a thick, large Oscar Mayer wiener, then that would be a coyote. So this here is a coyote. So remember that size. Large Oscar Mayer wiener. And if that doesn't work as a reference for you, think of something yourself that you know, could compare it to that, would make you remember coyote. How about this one? Back up a bit.
Yeah, if you want to put your hand beside it, might help us a little bit for scale.
Don't necessarily reference it based on just my hand though, because again, these are very small molds. Oh, so this one would be quite large. So it would be probably the size like of a massive sausage.
Okay, we all are saying wolf here.
Good, yes, yeah. You can see large pieces of bones, bigger bones in wolves than you would see in coyotes. Coyotes, when they usually eat, they'll kind of like only eat the smaller bones, whereas wolves will kind of chew like the whole bone. Like they will, take the big chunks. They are not scared to chew on the large bones, whereas coyotes tend to go for the smaller bones, just so you guys are aware. Like they'll chew up all the ribs and things like that. I'm thinking mainly of deer, right? Like a larger prey species. Obviously, smaller prey species, they can chew up whatever in there. That's not going to be a problem at all. All right, let's see this one. What do you guys think? This one actually would be.
All right, I'm seeing a couple people already jumping in with red fox.
That's right. Good call. And what diet is this red fox on? Does anybody remember? What is this mainly eating? It's got like twisted, kind of tapered.
We're hearing
likely
meat. Yeah.
Yeah, rodents. Good call. Okay, let's go for this honking big boy.
Whoa. Okay, looks like everyone, a lot of people are jumping in here. Wendy and Barbara are saying bear. Ellen?
Yes. Good call. Yep. Large, segmented, solid meat diet. It's got to be a little bit of a combo of meat in here because it's being able to hold its form. It's not just straight berries. So there you go. And
oh, that's a small one. All right. Anyone have a guess as to what this one is? We're hearing fox or maybe raccoon?
No.
Weasel?
No. This is one we went over. Now let's look at it close. So it's tubular, but if you notice, it's kind of a little segmented, a little twisty. Got the tapered ends.
Maybe you didn't hear me.
Small. It would be really musky. It would smell.
Okay, I did say fox, but maybe you didn't hear me. Is it
Oh,
fox?
sorry, yes, fox. Yes, you're right. Apologies.
There we go.
Good
No,
call.
all good.
All right, so then I'm going to come back to my PowerPoint here, and we will talk about our kitty cats next.
We've got some, yeah, really, people are paying attention. We're getting some really accurate answers already. There will be no more mystery poops at Fort White.
All right, so the next two are like tubular, similar with all of our, canines, but these are our felines. So now felines, you can identify because they have segmented poop. So by segmented, I mean like there's a chunk, can you see my mouse? There's a chunk, there's a chunk, there's a chunk, right? So it's like segments. So it's like little segmented poops that are smooshed together. So again, bobcats also have scat that you can find in a little trail or intersection, or sometimes even up on a rock. You are rarely going to find bones and hair in a scat because they do have really good digestive systems. And you may find that they are accompanied by like a scrape on the ground because of how they're like cats. They are cats, so they're like our house pets, right? And that, like how they try and cover up their scat, right? So the two that we have in Manitoba are our bobcats and our cougars. No, cougars, mountain lion, same thing, just in case you hear both terms. Now, bobcats are going to be smaller. Again, remember the size is variable because we will have larger bobcats up north and there's smaller bobcats down south, like in Manitoba. So, I mean like mid-Manitoba. You can see them more in the east, right, where we have the boreal forest. Bobcats that you see have these smaller segments. This one's like about 4 inches in total length, so it's not very, very large. On those ones, it seems to be kind of the common size. Like look on the bottom there, there's like a battery cell, so it's like a AA compared to like the scat, so it's a smaller scat, right? Whereas a cougar, this is a subadult, so this is a good example of size, okay? So this is a small cougar, segmented, and you basically base it on size. Again, it's going to be segmented, tubular, tapered on one end. It's going to have a smooth surface. It's going to have a strong odor. You will see hair and bones present in this one. Could be like accompanied with a scrape and could be covered in debris. So keep those things in mind. Are we going to come across these in your area at Fort White? Probably not, but maybe you guys want to have this information, right? We do have cougars that pass through Manitoba. So in my area, I'm in the west here, based out of Spruce Woods Provincial Park. So where I'm at, we have cougars that, meander through, but we don't have any that are breeding populations here in Manitoba. So that's why we don't have them as like listed as a species within Manitoba, but they pass through it. So you have to breed within the province to be counting as you have that animal, but we do see them. Okay, and there's another tubular one. I don't know if I have it in here. Oh, skunk. Skunk, I don't have the replica scat with me, but skunk is very similar. Remember to my lovely fox earlier with the rodent diet? Skunk is very, very similar, but they have like, and I swear every poop of a skunk looks the same because every time I've ever come across the skunk poop, it has looked almost identical to this. They've got 2 little poops and I swear it's 2. I mean, obviously it's not going to be every time, but I swear every time I found it, the scat looks identical and it does have that skunk odor. So you are going to find that. And because these guys are omnivores, you can find all the different items in it, just like you would with the other omnivore species. So you can find insects, seeds, you name it, within their diet. So they're little though, like skunk scat are little, like less than 2 inches. Very, very small scats. Trying to think of, I can't think of anything that could be relative to a skunk. I don't know. They look kind of like a leech. I don't know. We'll think of something. Maybe you guys could think of something for me for skunks for what it looks like or what food. I can't think of a food. But I'm gonna go and review then.
Sorry, I was wondering about cheesy or a something like that.
Oh, like a skinny. Yeah, you know what? Like a Cheeto. You know the crunchy Cheetos?
Yeah, there you go.
You are brilliant. Yes, a crunchy Cheeto. It's like the crunchy Cheeto size, right? Like that's what it kind of reminds me of. Yeah. And variable, just like regular crunchy Cheetos. Oh, I'm gonna remember that now forever. Thank you, because I never had one for that. Okay, so there's one other segmented poop that I'm gonna share with you, but I'm gonna share with you at the display table over here. All right. So, which one is which, do you guys think? What do you think is on the left?
All right, they're coming in. We've got cougar, bobcat on the left. And sometimes with the Zoom, the cameras flip around too. So can you put your finger on the one that's on the left?
One I'm pointing at.
Okay. I think we're generally thinking the larger one is cougar and the smaller one is the bobcat.
Correct. So this is the bobcat and this is the cougar. Again, this is a sub-adult, so this is going to be like a smaller cougar, and this could be, you know, any general bobcat that you have. So just remember these segmented poops. That is your giveaway that it's from the feline family. And then quite honestly, think about what you're in the area. Do you have any tracks or whatever nearby? Now, this one I don't have on my PowerPoint slide, but I wanted to share it with you because, oh, there it is. Oops, I lost the other piece of my poop. Now, this species, this belongs to an invasive species that is here in Manitoba. And it actually belongs to the wild boar. So wild boar are found in my area, which is why I do have this scat and thought it was important to share. So these guys have really squished scats that are kind of squished together. You know what I always think of it is? Do you ever get those like chocolate covered caramels that come in the box? And like juniors, I think they're called. And then, but every time you get them out of the box, they've all like squished together and melted. That's basically what this reminds me of. So it's basically pig scat, right? So it's wild boar. So it's squished together, like put together, kind of like an accordion. So that is wild boar. So if you ever happen to be, you know, in my area, say Spruce Woods, and you come across this, you'll know what species it belongs to. All right, so there we have our segmented. Does anybody have any questions about the segmented poops or the tubular poops? So basically the carnivores, the felines, so the canines, the felines, the raccoons, and the boar. Does anybody have any questions on those ones?
Just give people a moment to post any questions that you might have. That was exciting that you showed us the wild boar. I don't know that we've ever seen one at Fort White, but I know that they're quite a problem out west. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what kind of damage wild boar cause to the environment.
Yeah, they're really prolific, so they breed really quickly and they have a lot of piglets. So their populations can really blow up. And they also will root up vegetation. So they'll actually like dig up all the vegetation in an area and cause extensive damage. They'll like farmlands also in the area. They'll like eat your crop. They'll tear up your fences. They're very aggressive. So they're kind of a big problem all around. So we don't like having wild boar for sure. So you are legally allowed to hunt them at any time. So that's one way of management, but they're also looking at other ways of doing like a more larger scale management technique right now.
And how did they end up in our province? Sorry, how did they end up in our province to begin with?
They were brought in. Yeah, they were brought in as like an alternate farm, you know, for farming, for production, like pork production, right? So they were brought in, I think in like the 80s. And then unfortunately they got out of their pens. And because they're native from like Europe, right? Like they're like the Northern Europe, Russian type population species, that their climate is very similar to here. So they do perfectly well in our environment. So very similar to their home environment.
And
so,
Tina,
all right, so if there's no questions. There you
There's
do.
one more. Yeah, one more question that just came in here. Tina is wondering again about the wild boar. Do we have any idea what their population is in Manitoba? Like how many?
You know what? They don't have an exact number, but I like, don't quote me on this. But I think it's like roughly in like 500 in the area. So
Okay.
there's a lot. I don't think they have like an exact estimate right now, but like that's roughly, I think, within my area at least. So. So I have a few other scats that I found here that I'm just going to share with you guys. So I'm going to pop over to my other diagram here. Now one is going to be, let's talk about some birds. So when you find bird scat, obviously I'm not going to go through like the ones that you find on your windshield, because good luck identifying those ones. But in general terms, bird scat you're going to find has like a black portion and the white portion of the scat, right? Or the brown portion and the white portion. And that's because birds, they basically excrete their urine and their feces in one. So the urea is the white part and the fecal matter would be like the brown part. So when you would find them in the wild, even when you look at things like geese sometimes will have it, but there's a very variable, but things like pheasants or grouse, like you'll see those, they will have like the white and the brown on the scat as well. So that's what I'm going to be talking about, a couple different ones here. So here we have, I'm going to bring you a little closer. I'm going to bring my ruler here so you can get an idea of size. Okay. Now, this one right here, this is actually a turkey scat. So turkey, wild turkey, you'll see the scat, and the one thing that I always think of is that they make J's and S's with their scat. So they've got like, you'll see lots of like, it's kind of a curly scat. So the way it comes out, so if you notice, it's got like little S's and little J's. So it's a very alphabetical scat, if you will. Whereas when you look at things like a grouse, so I think this is a ruffed grouse, this is a grouse. So grouse scats, they are like small cheesies. And the cheesy puffs that you will find, this is like a really small amount. Really, when you go out and you find a grouse scat, it's in a pile, like it's a pile of poop. So it's like a pile of brown and white cheesy puffs is what it looks like the soft, fluffy cheesy puffs, not the Cheetos that we talked about earlier. That's like our skunk, but like the cheesy puffs. So that's what these look like. There's no J's and S's, they're straight across, and they're going to be in a massive pile. That's your indication that you have a grouse. And our Canada geese, which I'm sure you guys are quite familiar with, this one's a little bit of a smaller goose. But again, theirs could be any color, could be green, could be brown because of the diet, right? So if they're eating a lot of grasses, you'll see that it's more of like a green coop. So you will notice that change in the scat as well for the Canada geese. And we're all aware that we don't ever want to feed geese bread, right? I'm sure you guys are all well versed on that. But it's one thing I always like to tell everyone. Now, my last two scats, the very last two that I have to share with you guys, are going to be my, I wanted to include a snake scat just to kind of show you, this is obviously a larger snake. I don't even know exactly what species of snake this is. Let's see if I can get it focused there. It seems kind of out of focus. There we go. But snake scat in general, you're going to find is going to be kind of like blobby, like this. And it's going to still have like that white because, you know, reptiles like our birds, they all excrete out of the same cloaca. They both have the cloaca. So the urine and the feces are going to come out of the same spot in one go. And then my last but not least, so I have this one because I have hognose snakes where I'm from in Spruce Woods. We have hognoses. And then the other one here, this is a lizard scat, actually. So I like to show this to compare to our northern prairie skink, which is Manitoba's only lizard, which we have in our park as well. So it just lets you know that you'll see the brown and then you'll see the little bit of white. They didn't have that on, for some reason, the turkey and on the grouse, but that will be also on these two as well. In nature, you will see that. All right, any questions on my birds and my reptiles? We're good.
We'll just give it a moment in case anyone wants to pop anything in the the chat box.
Okay. All right, well, while we're still thinking, what I'll do is I'm going to move on to talking about our tracks next. So if anybody has any last minute questions about scats, now's your chance. And then I'm going to pop over to talking about animal tracks next. And I'll try and pick, I'll go over all the species that I know for sure that are going to be in your area. And if you guys have time at the end, because I know I think we're till 2:30, right? So I'll try and keep it specific for you guys. Reptile scat, yay, there you go. All right. So I am going to go over some of the common wildlife tracks that you're going to see. So you know what, I'm going to do ungulates first. So ungulates are our hooved species. So I'm going to go to my camera and we're going to focus on our ungulates first. I'm going to pull it back a bit because we've got, there we go. All right. So I'm going to just take one track from each. So these are 3 different species here. Boy, that's a big boy on the end. Let's see if I can zoom out some more. All right, there we go. So I've got 3 tracks here. You notice that they're all hooved, but there's a couple tricks to telling these species apart. Obviously, size is going to be your main one. You can definitely tell which one is bigger and which one is smaller. You can even compare it to a hand, right? So this one on the left is going to be our deer. Now, deer have like little heart-shaped hooves. So when you look at them upside down, kind of looks like a heart. That's what I like to think of, like a little heart. Very, very common. You're going to see these around in your area for sure. And just remember that this is the scat that goes with our white-tailed deer. Now, I doubt you're going to see this in your area, but I thought it would be a good one just to compare. This is an elk track. So elk tracks have very kind of like orange, I like to think it was like an orange segment. So it's kind of very curved and then flat in the middle. So that is the elk track. And moose tracks are just basically a jumbo version of a deer track. This one obviously shouldn't be split like that, but this is a juvenile moose, by the way. So much, much larger. So it's like a much larger scale of the deer. So that's how you tell those 3 apart. But I figure most people are pretty common, like pretty easy to identify our different ungulates here in Manitoba. They're pretty good to tell apart. So just really quickly, I'm going to do the scat next to the track so you guys can compare the 3. Is it focusing? Okay. Okay, so there we go. Those 3. So let's move on to some more. I know somebody wanted to know about fox and coyote tracks. So that's one we'll definitely go over. So let's go over the canines and the felines. So let's focus on the canines right now, because those are the ones that you're going to get most of the questions about. So I'm just going to grab different one. Okay. Oh, there it is. Where's my missing one? Okay. Now, I'm going to draw you guys a simple way to tell a canine and a feline track apart. This is one thing that everybody should know. So when you're looking at a canine track, what you're going to generally see is the pad of the foot is going to have 2 lobes at the bottom. And then they're going to have 4 toes. And the other thing they're going to have is they're going to have claws present. So the 2 lobes and the claws. This is going to let you know, of course I draw it in there. This is going to let you know automatically that this is a canine. So you know that you're going to be looking at, a fox, a coyote, or a wolf when you see that. If you happen to see a track that has 3 lobes, 1, 2, 3, and has 4 toes, ba-doop, ba-doop. But notice there's no claws. This will let me know that this is a feline. Wow, I can't type. So this would be either a bobcat or a cougar, because cats retract their claws. So that's why you're not going to see their claws indicated in this, right? Whereas canines, they can't retract their claws. So they're always going to see claws present. And the double lobe at the bottom versus the triple lobe. So this is how you tell the two apart. Obviously in your area, you're probably only going to be seeing this one, but I thought I'd just include this because this is really good general knowledge. All right, so let's go over the canines. There are some basic indications to tell them apart. So first things first, size. You know, obviously a wolf track is going to be much larger. It's about the size of a hand. So if you're looking at a track that's as big as your hand, you could be looking at a wolf or somebody with a large dog in the area. So if you're walking down a trail, like in a provincial park, or you're walking down a trail in, Fort White, it's probably not a wolf in Fort White. So you're probably looking at someone's dog. Now, how you can tell a dog apart quite often from other tracks is that dogs' paws generally splay. So like by splay, I mean like they really spread their toes apart when they're walking. So lots of times you'll see these toe pads are really spread apart, especially if it's a softer substrate like mud. You'll notice that spread even more. All animals will spread more in a soft substrate. But that's one way to kind of tell an animal track or a dog versus another one. But quite often they look almost identical, guys, and it's really hard to tell them apart. So a couple tracks or a couple clues to help to tell them apart. So let's just focus straight in on our coyote track. So this is a coyote, okay? So our coyote, things that to keep in mind. Coyotes have a very oval shape. So you'll notice it has that like very oval shape overall. And when you look at them, you can draw an X through the toes. So that means that if I have a track, let's see if I can do it right. You could be able to draw like a perfect X through their pads. So if you can kind of see here, it'd be like zoom, zoom. So that's one indicator. Also, coyotes always have the front 2 toes. They're like perfectly parallel. So you'll notice that like these 2 toes right here, they're like perfectly in line with each other. So they're perfectly across and they're both kind of facing forward. So that's like one clue as well. Whereas these back 2 toes here, they kind of like tuck in and underneath the front 2 toes. And that's what gives it that oval shape. So it's not a round shape, but oval because these 2 toes tuck in. So that's how you can identify a coyote track. For coyote, okay. Our foxes, they have different identifying features. So for a fox, one thing you'll notice in the track quite often, they have a lot of hair on their feet. So you're going to notice a lot of hair within the track. So it might be a little obscured because of all that fur that's on the bottom of their pads of their feet. However, they do have a very clear marking on their foot that can identify them as a fox. And it's actually this line that you see right here. They have like this kind of chevron shaped ridge on the back of their pad. So size-wise, they're going to be a little different, but they're going to always have this little ridge right here at the base of the pad of their foot. And then there you see. So that little chevron is always the indicator that you have a fox and the smaller size. But like, look at these tracks, you guys. Look at how similar in size this fox and this coyote are. This is a pretty large fox in my mind. I've seen much smaller ones usually, but I've seen also bigger coyotes. So again, remember that variability in size. You really got to focus on what's in the area. Look at a couple different tracks if possible. Is there scat nearby? But this line right here, which is going to be hard to see in like harder substrate, you really need to have like a good, like the softer, obviously the substrate, the easier our track is going to be able to read. And then obviously our last one would be like our wolf, which again, you guys don't really have to worry about in your area, but it's basically similar, looks like a very standard dog track, right? Very similar canine, 2 lobes at the bottom, 4 toe pads, and very large claws present, the size of a hand. Does anybody have any questions about our canines or questions between how to identify the fox versus the wolf?
Okay, yeah, we do have some questions actually coming in here. I've
Yep.
switched it back to your face screen rather than the table screen. So the first one has to do with the dog paws. You mentioned they splay more. Is there kind of a reason why like that dogs have evolved slightly differently, or they have an easy life, or
honestly, that was a very broad statement I made. It's probably not a very, you could probably ignore that statement that I made because it is pretty broad. It depends on your dog breed. It depends on all sorts of things. But you'll also tend to see more large splaying. Like I said, if it's a softer substrate, you'll notice that. So I would just keep that in mind. But just like when you're looking at like canine tracks, just really keep an eye on the concept of where is it? Is this on a populated trail that people take their dogs on? Is this out in the middle of a field, like at Fort White, right? Like just keep that in mind. But coyotes, by the way, do like to walk on like paths. So like if you do have paths, like coyotes like to walk on gravel paths in trails and stuff. So you absolutely could find a coyote track along your trails very easily. So look for the oval, the crisscross, and the toes, the 2 that are perfectly parallel, straight up, and then the 2 side toes tucked underneath. Keep those things in mind, and that'll tell you if it's someone's pet dog or if it's a coyote track. And then just remember, if you're not sure if it's a fox, just that chevron shape always.
Yeah, those are really good pointers. I haven't heard all of those before. So just looking at a bunch of different things rather than just one thing.
Yeah, you can't. I get people that send me pictures and like, I can't tell you exactly what this is because I need to know more information.
And then, so speaking of mystery tracks, these might be a picture that people would want to know about. Lou is wondering if you've ever seen Wolverine tracks or if you have an example of those for us. Oh, I'm just going to pop back over to that screen there. Nice. Glad we asked.
Yeah, so Wolverine tracks are quite large. They're very splayed out. They've got 5 toes. So that's one thing that's different. And they do have a lot of fur that you will find on the track. And as well, you'll see very large claws. So they have you will see claw marks in a Wolverine. But look how big this is, right? The big claw. So that's your Wolverine track. I'm going to go over just a few other quickly, the ones that I think that you will have in the area. So we've got our rabbit. So our cottontail rabbit, you're going to have the smaller 4 legs. So this is the front paws. And then the larger ones are the back paws. Now, a lot of people also confuse this one with squirrel, but squirrels have the same stride, so the same stride pattern, but the squirrel's back leg is only like, not even quite double, like just a little bit bigger than their front paws. What else we got here? Skunk tracks. They're cute little teeny tiny tracks. So they're going to be very small. They've got 5 toes. You'll see those little guys. You could also see a porcupine track. Porcupine tracks are fun because the front foot only has 4 toes. And the back foot has 5 toes. But they've got like this really, I don't know if you guys can see this, like the pattern on the pad of the paws has this kind of like bumpy papillae on it. And it's like very grippy kind of bumpy surface. So that's very unique to see on the porcupines. I think it's to help them climb on the trees. So a couple other common ones. We've got, do you guys have river otters where you are?
They have been spotted here, kind of rarely, but it's a ways, but we're not super duper far from the LaSalle River, and we're a watery stop on the way to the Assiniboine. So if there is an otter that's going cross country, there have been sightings, not like fully confirmed, but pretty sure that's what we saw. So yeah.
Well, I'll show you the difference here. So otters have webbed feet in the front and in the back. So they have webbed front paws and webbed back paws. And whereas beavers will have no webbing on their front feet, and then they have webbing on their back feet. And if you notice, they have much larger back feet than you'll see on an otter. So beavers have very large padded webbed back feet, and then very smaller, but they have large claws that they use to dig up mud and to help, you know, pack away. And then they have like little finger hands so that they can actually grab things. Oh, I'm missing my little people raccoon hands. Is anybody familiar with the raccoon track? So raccoons have, oh, there we are, I do have one. Raccoon tracks, they look like little hands, like straight up people hands. So if you see little people hands crawling on the ground, those are your raccoon tracks. So that's your easy identifying. Raccoons are the easiest. They're just like little people crawling on the ground.
Someone's wondering about mink tracks as well. So we're kind of thinking about the weasels with the otter and wondering about.
Yeah, do I have my mink tracks here? That's a good question. I thought I did. So mink tracks are very similar. Where did my mink go?
Mink are really fairly common at Fort White. Mink are something that we see, and every so often we have a pine marten that spends a bit of time here. It's rare, but very exciting when we see them here.
So I don't have my mink one on me, but it's very similar. This is a muskrat, okay? So weasel families are very similar. So that's why I'm gonna show you. So like, they will be like they have an elongated track. And they've got all their toes that are present. And they usually have like two kind of like, you'll notice like two kind of pads that kind of really stick out on tracks from the weasel family. So I know, I'm sorry, I don't have one here, but it's very in line with the concept of like long, lean, kind of like their bodies. You know, they've got long tubular bodies. So their tracks are going to be, you know, long, lean tracks as well. But this one's a muskrat. So my apologies. I don't have one of the other ones. Things like a badger, if you ever have a badger, you'll notice really long claws. That's a giveaway for a badger. And I think that's about, you know, you might find a groundhog tracks. We've got 4 in the front, 5 in the back, but they don't have that pattern like you see on the porcupine. So you can't mix them up because porcupine's larger, but they've also got like that papillae on the pads, whereas they don't have that on the woodchucks, the groundhogs, woodchucks. All right, so I'm gonna try and maybe do a quick skull one for you guys. Does anybody have any questions about any tracks? I can show you really quickly too. Here's a feline track, so that way you would have that idea of the 3 lobes on the bottom and no claws present. There you go.
Quite exciting for us to see a feline track at Fort White that wasn't a feral house cat.
It's probably a house cat, but now you can say for sure it's a house cat because it's got 3 lobes on the bottom and there's no claws present, right? So that's what you can say now, because you guys now know how to tell them apart. Did any other questions? I think I saw somebody said something about the woodchuck, but I think I showed you that one. So
yeah, wondering about groundhog or woodchuck. So that's a common name for the same animal, right?
Yes, yeah, groundhog, woodchuck, same species.
All right, so we've got 4 claws in the front, 5 claws in the back, and no porcupine grippies.
Yeah, no papillae on the paws.
Oh, sorry,
there he is.
I'll just pop back on there so everybody can see that picture. Oh yeah, focus it in. There we go.
Focus, camera, focus. My apologies.
It takes a little while.
Wants to be blurry. Giving me grief. Woo!
Woo! So that's our woodchuck groundhog there.
There you go. Yes, I think it's clear now.
Oh, that's super clear.
Can you draw an X through the fox? No, that's a specific one for the coyote. So that's like your clear indication of the coyote versus a fox, right? So here's my coyote. I can draw a line, bing, bang, boom. You notice in this one, it's like weebly wobbly this way, and then, okay, it's down this way, and then it kind of goes this way. So it's the coyote that has the cross through it. Notice this is that ridge in the fox and the fur and the track. Notice those. All right. So for skulls, oh, and then one other one too, guys. Sorry. Obviously, I think you guys probably might be familiar with this one. You guys familiar with that species?
Pop it up in the chat, folks. I know there has been one instance of one of these at Fort White, if I'm correct about what animal we're looking at. It was long before my time here, though. There.
That is correct.
Yeah, it's never a good scene when there's a bear within the city limits or an animal that's one that really should be in the wild. It involves a lot of different people showing up to try to make the situation more safe for everyone. So.
All right, I'm going to try and show you guys now some skulls. There is like a full-on way to identify skulls using dental formula. So like actually looking at the teeth and counting the teeth and assessing the teeth to figure out exactly what species it is. I'm not going to get into that today because A, we don't have the time, and B, I'm assuming you guys probably just want like general, like if you happen to see a skull, like kind of get an idea of basic information about it. Probably not being able to, because to identify to a species on a skull requires some work, because lots of times a coyote and a wolf look almost identical. They have the same, everything is just size is going to be a little different, and maybe where you found it, right? So same concept goes there. So I'm just going to show you guys a couple different skulls, and we'll talk about, poor little timer is falling apart. So when I look at skulls, the skulls are really cool because they tell you a lot of information about species. The first thing that you can tell by looking at a skull is I would pick it up and I would look at the shapes of the teeth, right? So what type of teeth does the animal have? If the animal, if the animal, forgot his jaw falls off, has these sharp canines, right? And has sharp teeth all the way across, right? I notice it's got all sharp teeth. Then I know that I can assume that this species is a carnivore. So then that lets me narrow down what type of species I have. I also notice that when you look at a skull, look at where the eye placements are. The eye placements are at the front of the skull. Looking forwards, you know it's a predator. If the eye sockets are on the side of the skull, like you see here, right? Here's the eye sockets to the side. Then you know it's a prey species, because prey species have their eyes on the side of their head. Predator species have their eyes facing forward. So there's these eye sockets. There's these eye sockets. Little guy here, his eye socket's right here. Whereas this one, the eye sockets are on the side. So I know prey, I know predator. So continue on with the teeth. I'm going to look at another species. These teeth are grinding teeth. They don't even actually have teeth on the up. This is a bony palate. So there's like teeth on the bottom of this one for, this is actually a deer in case anyone's wondering. They use this to, they press their teeth against like their bony palate to like rip off branches and whatnot. And then they have grinding teeth in the back. So that's a herbivore, an animal that's going to eat plant material. And then if you look at some species, they're going to have a combination of the two. So here we have grinding teeth in the back, and we have sharp canines in the front. So this is a bear. So this is an omnivore. So they have both teeth found within the skull. So those things are simple things that you can keep in mind to pinpoint, okay, is it a herbivore, carnivore, omnivore? You know, is it a canine, a feline, you know, ungulate? You can kind of get an idea based on usually what their teeth look like. Kind of the teeth is the most important part. If you have a skull without teeth, then you have to go basically completely on shape. There's a great book, speaking of, that you can get. I really love it. It's this one right here. It's Animal Skulls, A Guide to North American Species by Mark Elbrock. It's a really good one. So this has all the different skulls of North America species in there. So that's super helpful. Let's see. So when you're looking at skulls, things you want to keep an eye out for as well, just to name the different parts of a skull. So you've got the zygomatic arch. This is a big identifying feature. So this is, it kind of goes around the eye sockets here and the cheeks. You have got the nasal cavity, also called the rostrum. So that's down in this area. You have the brain case, which is this area in the back. You've got the sagittal crest. This is this big long crest. This is a huge identifying feature right here. You'll find different species have different shaped crests, and that can really tell them apart. And let's see, what's another one that I really go by? Length, so total length. So those are your main things that you're going to look at when you're trying to identify a skull. So total length would be, if you're looking vertically straight down on your skull, you want to go from the very back of the skull to the very, very front of the teeth. And that would be the total length of the skull, and that's what you measure. So when you go in the field and you find one, take a look at those teeth, take a look at the shape, and then what you can look at actually are called skull plates. And skull plates are found in a guidebook. And so here's an example of one that we made for Envirothon here. So a skull plate would look like this. It would have like photos of the different skulls. And then from there, you can compare and determine it based on the size of the skull. So then we have like the different skull lengths on here. So we also do something called dental formula to determine what family it's from. But that's quite a process that I'd have to teach you how to do that, which I could come back another day if you guys really want to learn how to do dental formula, because then you can determine exactly what species it belongs to if it's in the carnivore family. Otherwise, you're basically going to go fully on the skull. The other thing you can talk about to tell differences is lots of skulls are going to have kind of basic overall shapes. Like your canines are all going to have this very similar shape. Your bears, they all have the same kind of broader, thicker shape, kind of like the advanced size of like a wolf one, right? So a much broader, larger nasal cavity, shorter. Coyotes, foxes, wolves, they all have a very similar shape, longer nasal cavity here that kind of comes down more. Your deer, they're all very similar. That bony plate on the top. So that's very similar. You're going to see the same for moose or elk. They all have the same kind of general skull shape. Our weasel families, they have long, remember they have long tubular bodies. They also have long and long tracks, and they have long skulls. They're just like a giant tubes. So these are from the weasel family. This one is pine marten. This is my pine marten. And this one over here is my river otter. So you can see they're different sizes, but they both have that same kind of overall skinny, long, tubular kind of shape to it. And if you notice, they have very similar but different crests at the back of the skull. So the fact that this one comes to like a point here and comes down, that is like a major indicator that it's a pine marten, whereas this one only has two, right? So that's how I know, one of the reasons why I know this one is a river otter. So those crests, the shape of the skull, the arches, these are all keys that you can look at. So I'm basically showing you what to look at so you can look it up in a guidebook. Wolverine, also from the weasel family. You notice kind of like a longer, but they have a little bit more of a broad face, short nose, very strong jaws. So there's got a Wolverine, just to kind of give you an idea. Obviously, ones that you find that have these type of teeth, I'm pretty sure you guys could all identify this one. This one's pretty easy. And this one is our beaver skull. So he's got his grinding teeth, and we've got this from the family Rodentia. So that's how you know it's from the Rodentia family. They have these teeth that will continuously grow. So they have to keep chewing to break it down. The outer part is a harder tooth material versus the inner part, which is a softer tooth material. So that's why they will wear it down, and it'll always be on an angle. And that allows them to have really sharp teeth so that they have the perfect pinching capabilities. But you're going to see that is similar tooth in our other one. So this one's actually a rabbit. I think this is a jackrabbit, actually. So it's a bit larger rabbit. But you see the teeth has that rodentia teeth that overlap. And the fun fact, if I'm correct, oh, is this the one I have? Yeah. I have to look closely. These replica ones, one of the I think it's the snowshoe hare has like a double tooth. So like the tooth behind the front tooth is actually a double tooth. So I have a double tooth on the front. So that's like one of their indicators. You don't have to worry about that because we don't have those ones here. And then my raccoon. So my raccoon skull, it's kind of in its own little world. It's its own little family, that's why. But they've kind of got their own little shape to it as well. So skulls, you really just gotta keep those key kind of identification features. Felines are gonna be very oval. So if you ever say come across a cat skull or something like that, they're very oval, they're more round, right? So feline would have that more oval shape to them. So it's really dependent on those factors. So look at the overall shape, where the eye placement is, look at the teeth, and then have a guidebook that you can look at skull plates. And then those skull plates will help you to determine exactly what species it is. Because there's really not like one, you know, I couldn't just say to you guys, this one's always going to be this one, because it'd be very hard to differentiate them. You really need to have like a skull plate that has the lists of all the different, you know, skulls to compare. Sometimes you only get like the lower mandibles, the lower jaws, and there's even like in you know, there's even plates for that. So if you just get the lower jaw, or if you just find, you know, the upper jaw, you can search it that way as well. Does anybody have any questions? I know that was like really fast skulls for you guys, but
was great. There's so much to cover, and you did it all. So thank you. If anyone has some questions, you can pop them in the chat. We only have a couple more minutes though. And you don't want to keep Jen too long. But everyone's saying excellent, wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I learned a lot actually, that fox versus coyote, going into that really deep was really, really helpful, I think, particularly for me, because that's always something I wonder about when I see tracks. Yeah.
And it's totally fair if you can't determine, like, I don't know, I feel like some people put pressure on themselves to know exactly what it is. And there's a lot of times where I still don't know what it is because, you know, like you need things to kind of help you out, or it's just not a perfectly clear track, or it's like, I can't tell if this is 3 lobes or 2, or, you know, sometimes cats, like felines, when they are jumping, they'll push their claws into, you know, the substrate. So then all of a sudden you will see claws present in a track, whereas before you didn't. So it's like, oh, okay, now I'm seeing it. Like, so you got to think of like, what is it doing? So I'm giving you the very surface level of identifying tracks, but there's everything from like patterns and like what their loping pattern is, or hopping pattern, or things like that will really help you out as well to identify the species, you know, but I didn't even get into that. So another day.
Yeah, it's a really good thing to keep in mind, to like keep your eyes open when you're out there for other clues other than just the thing that you've seen. Like step back a little bit and look around. And that's part of the enjoyment of it. That's, I think, why most of the people are on this call. They're just passionate about learning more about plants and animals and noticing those things around us. So thank you again so much for joining us, Jen. I'll get in touch with you just to get the particular links for those wildlife resources. Sure. And I'll share the recording with folks, and I can also share that as well. So
there's the link. I just posted it to the resource page for Envirothon. So basically it has in there fur ID, scat ID. It even has like birds of Manitoba, mammals of Manitoba, even has a herpetology guide. And then at the bottom, it has training videos. So I have created entire training videos for scat tracks. If you guys want to learn about, determining population, that's in there. And also the dental formula. So I go into explaining that dental formula and identifying skulls based on the dental formula. So that's in there too.
That's great. Yeah, so thank you again so very, very much for taking the time to spend with us. I think that's what I'm all seeing in the chat there, just lots of thank yous. So yeah, where can we access the resources? Perfect. I'll send out that link again in case you didn't get it out of the chat, folks, as well as the name of that book, which I wrote down. So we're good there.
Even the Peterson's Field Guide to Mammals. You guys familiar with that book? I mean, that's pretty, like, everybody has, I find, that book. That book also should, if I recall correctly, it has the skull plates in there as well. So you'll have that option as well.
Yeah, perfect. All right, everyone. Well, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and same to you, Jen. And we'll see you around. Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a wonderful day.
Okay. Bye, everyone.